All right, and we are live.
Okay, hello. This is What's Left of Philosophy. I'm Lillian, and here with me today is Will, Owen, and Gil. Hey guys, how you doing?
Hello.
Yo, what's
Good.
up,
How are you?
everyone?
Good to see you. Okay, so today we're doing a special live stream for our 100th episode. So I think we've been doing this for 3 years or something, and at a rate of roughly 2 episodes a month. So we're at number 100. Thanks you to everybody for being here and for those years of support. It really means the world to us. We thought it'd be fun to do something special for this episode, so we opened up our mailbox and asked you to send us some questions to answer. We got a ton of submissions, which is very cool. We'll try to get to as many as we can over the next hour or so. So our apologies if we don't get to your question. Happy we got a lot, but I guess that's a good
Mhm.
problem to have.
Yeah.
So without further ado, let's get into it. I think the first ones we'll answer about the show. So the first one a few people asked is, how did you all meet? And we need the origin story. So
Ooh,
someone tackle that one.
alright.
Also, just let me know if anyone can say in the chat if the audio sounds properly balanced. I'm trying to do that in real time. Appreciate it.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, I guess I can start because out of the four of us, I think Lily and I, we met first. So I was actually leaving Penn State. I had defended my dissertation, and Lily and you came to Penn State for Pixie or something like
Mhm.
that. And
What's
and
Pixie?
yeah, well, Pixie is
Philosophy in an
currently in.
inclusive key, Owen.
Mm.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, Owen's
So
privilege
it's
showing
kind of
there.
to get, I
Doesn't even
guess,
know.
Bad look.
underrepresented undergrads interested in philosophy. But yeah, wow, Owen, you're not keyed into helping the cause,
Didn't
diversifying the
get that
discipline.
acronym right away.
Guilty.
Wow. So yeah, I don't remember how we started talking. I do remember we were in the bar talking about Marx, and eventually the conversation I think got to Foucault, and I knew you were a real one because we were like so fed up with everyone telling us so Foucault already did it. We need to do power, 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 power. I'm like, enough power. We don't want any more power. And so I was like, I can
That's
trust
Much
the
you.
power.
power talk.
Yeah. So that's how Lily and I first met, and then we hung out again once I moved to Chicago with you and your
Hmm.
your now husband,
Hmm.
and then I met Gil because I guess Gil came to a talk I gave, and when we moved to Chicago, emailed me out of the blue. He's like, "Hey man, you probably don't know me. You want to get a drink?" And I don't know. I was willing to risk my life, so I went up to Gil and he seemed like a pretty cool dude. Made one too many race jokes for for first meeting somebody.
I like to make a good first impression.
But you know what? You made a good bet because I was into it. I was into
Well,
it.
I had seen you give a talk at SPEP on like feno and black feminism, and I was like, oh,
That's the first time I saw Will. That was like years before the
Right.
podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, this dude's from the future. I need to be friends with him.
Yeah,
Was
years
literally how
before I
I
ever
thought.
talked to you again, I came up to you in the restaurant the next day
That's
after your
right.
talk, and I was like, I just like tapped you on the shoulder, and I was like, bro, that was fucking insane. That was so good. I haven't seen a talk like that
I
in forever.
remember that.
Anyways, I'll see you never.
You didn't give me your name. I was
No.
just like, glad I'll never talk to that person ever again. I'm
Yeah.
hungover. Why is he talking to me right now? Yeah. So I think,
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I met the three of you. But I guess there's more to say about how eventually this
Well,
happened.
well,
So
I
one of
came in.
all
Yeah,
can
you guys,
talk about that.
Gil, and Lillian had a group chat going that because you guys had been
Hmm.
connected, and then
Well,
the
you and I,
pandemic hit.
because Owen, you and I went way back,
Yeah.
Yeah,
way, way.
Gil and I have been friends for a very long time.
Yeah, we
Um,
met. We met in our both of our first year in grad
Grad
school
school.
or in the PhD
Yeah.
program
Yeah,
back in 2011, shockingly.
yeah,
And then so when this group chat was going on during the pandemic, it was me, Will, and Lillian, and we were all basically just like we were all just kind of sending each other the same news stories and the same jokes, and we were like, this
yeah,
should be one group chat. And then after a while, we were
yeah.
like,
So you
this
looped
should
me
be a
in.
podcast.
Yeah, and then we were, just to be clear, like in the at the height of the lockdowns, we were all just like stuck at home. We were in that group chat, the four of us. It was. I actually yearn a little bit for those days. That was we were literally in there 24/7, just
Cooking.
going mad, just
Some of our
cooking.
best
Yeah.
jokes
La,
ever.
yeah,
The
great.
In
best
that
jokes, the
group
best.
chat.
Also, like getting to know each other. Like it was, I don't know. It was such a unique experience for a group chat. Like
No.
Yeah, and then we did a Zoom call together. Someone came up with the idea of like, how about we actually
Looked
just,
sort of like
talk
this.
face to
Yeah.
With worse
exactly
microphones.
like this. And
Yeah,
it was
that's
just
when
like,
during the pandemic when that's how people were hanging out.
Oh,
So it
God.
seemed normal
Having
at the
a
time.
beer, just have a
Yeah.
beer together or whatever. Oh my God. Yeah,
No,
and
we
then
have to go
at
back.
the end we were like, why don't we we could have just that could be a podcast. I mean, we just
it was like
we
an
just talked
offhand
about.
joke. But
Yeah.
right? And then, like in a few days, Gil sent us a picture of a microphone that he had bought. And I was like, oh, I guess this is about to actually happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so we were like, if we're gonna do this, let's do it properly. We made everybody buy microphones. We did the first 3 episodes as like a proof of concept over the course of a month, just by ourselves, like without releasing it, just to see if it was viable. And after that month, we were like, oh wow, we have like 3 pretty good episodes here. And then we decided to drop those all at once, and then sort of things kind of have been proceeding apace since then. So yeah, that's where we came from, I think.
Yeah.
And we're here 3 years later.
Okay, should I move on to question 2?
Yeah, do it.
Sure.
Okay, someone says, I'm curious how you
can
all
I ask
think...
them quick? What's the plan for the live chat? Like,
I'm keeping an eye on. I'm keeping an eye on the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the idea is we're going to try to prioritize the stuff that was submitted in advance. But if any particularly good questions or germane stuff comes up, I'll bring it in.
Cool.
Okay, so this one is, I'm curious how you think through the facilitation and dynamics of a single episode. As a secondary teacher, even a 50-minute lesson requires thoughtful preparation for how a learning outcome is to be realized, analyzed. Do you all find your writing styles seeping into the different methods of working together, or teaching styles, organizing styles, or something else? I have to be honest, I don't think, like, I read pretty carefully and then I just show up. Unless I like do the introduction, then I think a little more carefully about what I want to say. But I think it does require, like over time, there's a cumulative amount of preparation to read that much outside of my usual work. Like, it's like the longest reading group I've ever been.
Yeah.
It actually stayed together.
Yeah, reading groups don't last generally.
We don't really think through the dynamics of the episode. We just talk.
Yeah, I mean, I occasionally if I'm hosting an episode and it's on something, especially not something that I have like expertise in, I'll put a little more time into thinking about, is there a way to structure the conversation. But once it starts, it kind of takes on a life of its own, and
Yeah.
they don't really want to mess up that organic flow.
Yeah, I mean, I always, maybe you all don't do this, but I always think I know how the episode is going to go. I'm like, I'm pretty sure we're going to, answer these questions, talk about these things. Every episode, I'm always surprised
Right.
by the left turns we take. But I think part of if it is a method is we also all respect the importance of spontaneity, so we try not to actually talk about the episode. We're trying not to pregame too much.
Oh yeah.
Before
We'll
each
even like
episode.
stop each other if we're in the group chat and someone's saying something.
Yeah.
We'll just all right. We'll leave it. Just
Whoa,
save it.
yeah, enough of that. We're gonna get there, right? Yeah, I think that's right. We all try to. I mean, the mechanics, the genuine mechanics for episodes is like about a week out usually. One of us, and we've got a kind of schedule figured out, so we know who's going to be the next 1 or 2 or episodes down the line, and we maybe talked about what we want that to be. But it's each of us individually is like who's hosting the episode picks the readings, and we try to limit it to like 60, 70 pages is what we try to keep it to. Long time listeners may remember that like our third episode. Our third episode, we read the entirety of Hegemony Socialist Strategy
God, yeah.
by McClellan Moon.
That's
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Insane
It's
waste of time.
First of all, bad book, waste of time.
We had to rein it in after that and be like, we got to cap it
I
around
actually
50
remember
pages.
like I told you guys that I like skimmed part of that because I have like very heavy underlining and notes going on in that book from like when I was a grad student, like really figuring it out. So I like reread the first chapters and then I like confessed that I had like skimmed, and Gil was like, to be honest, Lillian, I don't like that. And I remember
Oh no.
Yeah, yeah.
well, then we have to. Then
so
you can't
sorry.
give me 200 pages.
Yeah, no, it was
That's
too
not gonna
much.
work.
It was way too much.
Yeah.
No, so like
That was in the group chat. That wasn't. Yeah. So,
Oh,
yeah,
I'd
that was a little
forgotten
behind
about
the
that.
I forgot about
scenes.
that
Yeah, I
entirely.
forgot.
That was
man,
bold,
yeah,
'cause that was
part of the
early on. I
lore.
was like, Gil, Don't implode the podcast.
The podcast doesn't exist yet.
I do
Bracing
that.
for
I have
impact.
done my
Doesn't-
reading carefully since then.
All of us do. But yeah, after that, we tried to be more disciplined for ourselves about how much reading we can handle. So we, like I said, usually give the others like around a week and share PDFs or whatever. And then, whoever is doing the episode writes up the intro, and we try not to let that go too long. I know I've been guilty of writing too much. And then it's very spontaneous. There's not much in the way of like Will said, totally seconded. I sometimes think I know how it's going to go, and then just like, absolutely not. Way off.
I guess the other thing that's worth saying is, this is a weird format, so we can't, say, do all of the phenomenology of spirit. So we also try to select what we think might be representative of a particular idea, while granting that yes, a particular person we're talking about has probably written other things. So I know sometimes people respond like, well, why didn't you read X, Y, Z? And say, well, because it's impossible to read all of X, Y, and Z in a consumable format like a podcast, at least if we want to be enjoyable. So we try to always be honest, but also try to get at the heart of things rather than being like, let's do a whole book, except for that one time.
I think that's
for the one time we fucked up.
Yeah, I think that's challenging for whoever you're covering, but it's really hard I would like to do a lot more like Kant and Hegel, but it's really hard. It's very hard to select a part of the Critique of Pure Reason or of the Science of Logic or any of those books, which are such totalities. They need to be taken as a whole. So that is the challenge. I don't know. I still haven't figured out a way, but hopefully
Just
maybe we
assign
can
us the introduction. That's what all professors do. Just give us the introduction.
the introduction.
I'm
But you're not
sure
even supposed to
there's
read
evidence
until
anyone's ever
after.
read beyond the introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're not even supposed to read it until after you finish the book. He's very clear about that.
Oh my god, don't listen to
He is
that.
very
Shut
clear
up
about
bro.
that.
So I think that I would sum this up by saying we don't do that much preparation aside from like thinking about the reading, and then one person does more preparation than other people. And I think that's probably important because I don't think we would have succeeded in putting out as much content if we did anything else, because I think that would like not make it fun for us. Like part of what's fun about this is that we like it, and if we start to not like it, I don't think you all would either. Imagine like sitting down and writing little scripts for each other. That would be horrible.
Nightmare fuel.
Yeah. Okay, so are there 3 to 4 philosophers that comprise your philosophical foundation? And are there compelling tensions that exist between these foundations that you would like to speak to? That's a good question.
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah.
I mean, mine's obvious.
I personally have totally totally integrated worldview. So
You know nothing of the negativity of contradiction. Could never be me.
Couldn't be me.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Gil, you should go first because I think. Oh no.
No, you go. Yeah, we'll talk about Spinoza and Marxism, Gil.
Yeah, that's the answer, right? Because Spinoza and Marx for me, obviously. I think someone said in the chat they were proposing a drinking game. If I mention Leibniz or Spinoza, you got to drink.
Nice.
The other rules
already in it.
Yeah. Obviously Marx and Spinoza for me. I don't know. Spinozism has always just made the most sense to me out of any like metaphysical system, and I can't help but be like a rationalist in like a dogmatic old school sense that is extremely unfashionable today. But I get a lot of the things out of Spinoza that like that the four of us end up liking. I'm wondering if maybe we can end up talking about totality, the concept. But like totality is like a category that like I find real interesting foundations for in Spinoza. The determinism is, I think, explanatorily useful. The critique of ideology and teleology is, I think, really core and central to me. And I find a lot of compatibility between that and like Marxism, historical materialism more broadly, which I just think is like the most explanatorily useful framework just at all. And like, Marx is maybe the most robust philosophical elaboration of that in practice, I suppose, in Capital, which I think you just need to read. If you don't read Capital, you don't know what the fuck's going on like 90% of the time. That just seems true to me, having been to a lot of philosophy conferences. And then I guess like third thinker for me is probably Kant. I'm a late bloomer on that. I've come around.
Let's go.
I've
Yeah.
come around to Kant in so many ways for reasons that have to do with, I don't know, the inadequacies
Yeah.
of alternative moral philosophies, for whatever else we can say about the problems with Kantian bourgeois morality. And I don't know, he's one of my favorite system builders. I love a system. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a similar kind of like tension for me because I'm like in equal parts drawn towards a tradition that's kind of lumped in with realism sometimes, in which force and right are understood to be immanent with one another. There's
Yeah.
really a distinction to be made between force and right. So that's in Machiavelli. That's in Spinoza's political treatise. I'm very, very drawn to that tradition. I find it incredibly compelling. But I'm also a crypto Kantian. I also believe that force and right,
Yes.
there is no point.
Can't be the same. They cannot
There's
be.
no point of doing society unless we can find a way to like practicably distinguish between force and right, and to build like social structures, the foundations of social structures on right and not on force.
Yeah.
So I don't know, and that's a non-integrated worldview. I don't.
Yeah, I have that
One
same.
day,
I have that same problem
you know,
with Spinoza and Kant and Marx
And
too.
Hegelians, don't come at me with Hegelians saying that he systematized it all and perfectly synthesized the whole.
Oh, it turns out.
Those two competing traditions.
Hey, listen, I read the Science Logic.
There's
turns
a lot
out,
of good stuff
Turns
there.
out the ought is the is, and the is the ought. We're good. We did it.
It's really hasn't worked out that way.
That's very
Obviously,
convenient.
okay, so you all kind of beat me to it, I think you. Funny story, I gave a talk a couple weeks ago that Owen came to, and at the end of the talk, Owen immediately raises his hand. He's just like, detecting a bit of crypto-Kantianism here, just outing me in front of all of these radical folks.
Brutal.
And, and luckily, there was like one retired professor there who was also a Kantian. In that moment, I just saw him sagely nodding his head, just like, yes.
Same
So-
team.
Yeah,
Same team, pal.
Yeah. I tell this to the group chat, and Gil ate me up by being like, the only thing I don't understand is the crypto part.
Hey, what do you mean crypto? You're talking
Yeah.
Kantian, dude.
Yeah, so Kant, Ernst Bloch, honestly, I think that the tensions there is obvious. It seems like there's an incompatibility between utopia and Marxism, even though Bloch thought he was a Marxist. And so those sort of romantic elements or quasi-romantic elements in Ernst Bloch, how is that compatible with the type of scientific worldview of social processes and revolution? So I think Kant, Ernst Bloch, it maybe it's too obvious to say Marx, but he is. He's foundational.
Yeah.
And okay, here's my spicy one. In a strange way, third generation critical theory, as in I feel compelled to read it and try to make sense of it. And many times, Owen heard my talk, I disagree vehemently, and yet there's something that keeps
Yeah.
drawing me back.
Who do you mean, like Gadamer Habermas stuff, or?
Yeah, the Gadamer, Habermas. I guess Rainer Forst is in the fourth generation, but that type of stuff of trying to bring Kant back, and yeah, I'm just
There he goes again.
Okay,
Kant.
there he goes again. And I guess there's an OG Kant and trying to make Kant great
Yeah.
again.
Make concrete again.
What kind of slip was that, man?
Whoa!
We'll have to edit that out.
I believe that's what we call dark MAGA.
Yeah.
But instead I'll say probably like Dewey and pragmatism. Yeah, I'm really interested in that, and but in ways it's really not compatible with my other commitments.
Yeah, I think Marxism and pragmatism is a point of tension for me, but I think I'm not sure it's that much of a tension though, because I think that pragmatism is a much less foundational way of constructing my worldview. I think I have a very ad hoc relationship with pragmatism. I think it helps me. I don't think it really forms how I think about the world. But that might be one. I think maybe my relationship to immanent critique is kind of a tension. I think I kind of like it. I like the idea of contradictions and so on, and I think sometimes I take a step back and I'm like, that can't be right. That, it can't.
We need a transcendental normative standard or something.
Yeah.
I
I
get
feel
that,
like
yeah.
maybe external critique is just fine. Because I'm not really sure where the imminent thing is going, but it sounds like I try to make that work I feel like I seem like I try to make that work on the podcast quite a bit, but I'm not sure it does. Let's see. I don't know. I think some of my favorite feminist thinkers are like radical feminist thinkers, and I just like don't really agree with their worldview, but I don't find a lot of contemporary feminism like very compelling, and so like I tend to teach them with like a lot of enthusiasm, and like my students seem to like them for that reason. And I find myself wondering why that is. I'm not sure it is a I don't really know what tension that's pointing to, but anyway, that's what I would say.
Cool.
Well, I think one other thing I
yeah,
might add before we move on, like obviously I have a whole side of me that works in philosophy of race, so I read like writings in classical Black nationalism, like Martin Delany and Marcus Garvey. And again, I don't endorse their politics, but I do see something. I see what's interesting there, what's happening, and I like analyzing it. But there's a Marxist side that's just like, no, ruthlessly critique it. This can't work. But there's a part of me that's just like, but no, I don't want to just simply say no to it as if nothing interesting is happening there. But yeah, that's a real tension for me. That absolutely is antithetical to all my other commitments.
Yeah, I don't also just work on interested in early modern stuff, but I guess I don't know, move on beyond this.
This one's cute. What intellectual proclivity or philosophical commitment do each of you admire most about each of your co-hosts?
Wow.
Oh damn,
that's this question.
It's really hard.
That's really hard.
It's really hard.
Okay.
We could come back to that if you
hard.
want.
No, I mean hard in the sense of, I genuinely just have like a lot of respect for all three of you for like a lot of reasons. Like I think you're all really clear thinkers who think broadly and who are concerned with problems that are real and pressing. And this was one of the things. This kind of also, I think, answers to like the how'd the pod come together question. Like part of, I think, why the four of us found each other was having like spent a bunch of time in academic philosophical circles and sort of found the way that the other three like were interested in like real problems and committed to a kind of clarity and like avoiding jargon. Like all of that was stuff that I thought, I don't know, I really appreciated about all of you from day one since we met.
I mean, I could also do a
quick. I feel like global thinking. I feel like is a good way of putting it. Yeah. Like there's different kinds of intelligence in general, and I would describe mine, and like people close to me have described mine as like a global intelligence. Like I'm not very detail oriented, and sometimes I don't like articulate details that well, but they're kind of like I have to kind of train. I have to pull them, extract them, and like order them to make my reasoning like clear, but they're usually there, but I don't usually do that willingly. They tend to like be kind of nebulous. And I do feel like I think that you guys are sometimes more detail oriented, and it helps me like focus in on some of the point. Like I find that very useful. Like it helps me zoom in on some things that I'm thinking that are not necessarily highlighted in my brain. I feel like that happens in our conversations a lot.
Yeah, I think the reverse is true too, from my perspective, because sometimes, and I feel like it's that DePaul like close reading continental philosophy like tradition that I feel like was inculcated in me like pretty hard. I can sometimes like feel in a conversation like, wait a second, I've been a little too lost in the weeds here, like in the exact like I don't know, it's one particular line or the use of some terminology, and then you get pulled back up, by one of you guys. You, Lillian, are really good at this, like pulling back up. Okay, what are we doing here?
What are we doing?
What's
at stake actually?
Yeah, but I could also do a quick like rundown and just say, for the three of you, like I think. I mean, obviously, there's much more to each one of us than these things, but certain things that stand out that I really, really appreciate. Like Gil is like a ridiculously lucid thinker. Like, and when you said I appreciate like the clarity and the clarity and system and the system building, like you can think that way, and you can often do it like pretty spontaneously in terms of connecting things in a kind of complex systemic way. So. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's just I'm reading God's handwriting in the universe.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean that's yeah.
It's divine. It's divine intuition. It's not a muscle or anything. It's just like that.
I think. Were you gonna?
No, I mean, I just think like Lillian has super strong intellectual convictions, which I always find really refreshing. Very like strong, clear convictions. And I think Will's like a super adventurous thinker. Like you're willing to take on a bunch of even things that seem outlandish.
Totally.
And you're willing to like give them a shot and try to make sense of them. And I don't know. I think it's really good for the pod.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was going to say for Gil, you have a way of clarifying premises and conclusions on the spot that is really great. It's sometimes it brings us back home where you're like, okay, so if that is the case, and you also cite the text. I think the three of us sometimes you'll cite the text, but we like to just keep it going. So I really appreciate this type of rigor you have of saying, here's the claims that are going. Lillian, I appreciate you have this way of cutting through the bullshit and just make it clear. So here's the stakes. Here's why it matters. Here's the beating heart of it. And Owen, I think what I love about you is you make the text alive in a way. I know maybe it's kind of the sort of anarchist sensibilities you might have, but the best metaphor I have for it is like you can get like at the magma of the text of what is the
Magma,
joy.
Nice, I like that. Yeah,
That's pretty good, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
I practiced this week. But yeah,
Nice, nice.
Yeah, I
I
feel
think all
like
of
your
those
Owen
things
is really good at like following the text, like where it could go, and like kind of letting it speak. Like I feel like there's a excitement that you get about just like seeing what happens to the ideas, and I find that really fun.
I will also say that like one of the things that is like true of all of us, and it's one of my favorite things, is that like I watch you people change your minds about stuff all the time, like mid episode, which is very cool. Like it's at the same time that we do all have like a set of like hard intellectual and political and ethical commitments. Like watching like, oh, the argument goes that way, and oh, that's got to be right. Just like a light bulb goes on, and all four of us have done that in episodes, and that openness is really cool. And
I will say,
too.
just in general too, that the podcast has drawn me in that vein much closer towards a like. I'm way softer on the state. I'm actually pretty pro state. And it's not that I was like totally anti-state, but I had this.
You're a Hobbesian.
Insurrectionary anarchy. That's I know. But there was like an insurrectionary anarchist vein in my reading of what I was interested in, and I feel like I was given some healthy correctives with respect to that.
Well,
although I still feel
This
like
is so crazy.
Will's not wrong though. I think energy-wise, I still have like there's anarchist energy in like
yeah.
But anyway,
I was standing outside a bar last night, and I was like, for some reason, Hobbes came up, and it was
awesome.
like, yeah, it ruled. I kind of forget like how this, but we started saying like Hobbes was so ahead of his time. Like people think he's such a big reactionary, but really his main contribution was that he saw that like the different pockets of like feudal power needed to be like broken down, and there needed to be like a centralized state. And we were like, whoa, that was like really like he was very forward thinking.
Pretty wild for 1630.
Let
it was like
yes.
Yeah, because the way you're taught about that. Sorry, this is not. I don't know that the way you're taught about that is like the Leviathan, very authoritarian, very whatever.
Yeah.
But no, it was like that whole thing about he didn't want people to form into groups and like fractions. It's like no, he saw the problem with like pre-modern states, and he was moving us to the future.
Yeah. Hundo.
Thank you, Hobbes.
I want to say last thing about the composition of the pod is that like I truly think that like this is like all four of us are necessary for like the show to work. Like we do each bring something different perspectives, different sort of energies, different levels at which we're most comfortable. And like I think all four of us are integral. Like we've tried really hard to avoid episodes where even one of us is missing, and whenever it's happened, it's like, oh yeah, like I'm missing an appendage, right? Like it's something's wrong. So I don't know.
No, I agree.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that.
Okay. That was very sweet. Thank you guys. I was wondering if the What's Left of Philosophy crew's opinions on novels, what are our opinions on novels? Does anyone on the crew read fiction with an eye to philosophical elements, or are novels more pure entertainment / aesthetics? Read anything good lately? That's a good question.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I used to read a lot more novels than I do now, and it makes me really sad.
Me too.
But I don't do it as much, and not just because I think it's really good for philosophers to read novels, not just ones that are philosophical. You know, like people bring up Brothers Karamazov, which is probably the only one that ever pulled it off. Not true. Never mind. Sartre Beauvoir can write philosophical novels, and we'll throw a little Camus in there for those. I know there's a Camus question.
There's a Camus question coming.
Yeah.
Put a pin in that.
Yeah, but anyways, I just think like apart from the philosophical content of the novel, I mean, I just think it's super edifying and good to immerse oneself over a long duration. Like that's what's unique about novels as an art form.
Yeah.
It's not like a film. It's not like looking at a painting. It's the duration of it, and I think it allows you to genuinely rewire your brain if it's a really good book, and you enter a different logic, a different world. And I like. I'm gonna make that I don't know, maybe a New Year's resolution this year. I got to start going back to reading novels. I also studied comparative literature when I did my undergraduate, so it's just a part of my past that I really miss.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've actually read a fiction novel, and I was actually just, I was talking to my partner, a couple weeks ago, that I worry that I've let that part of my brain kind of wither away.
Yeah.
Because one of my favorite novels actually is this Western called Lonesome Dove. It's, like 500, 600 pages, and I just absolutely love that book. And I think I echo what Owen said. There's something nice about a novel of trying to take it on its own terms rather than wrenching philosophical claims out of it. That, actually letting the artwork have its own sort of organization and structuring and taking it on that, I think, it can certainly open you up in ways that I'm not quite sure just reading straight philosophy can do. But yes, I also want to make the commitment to read more fiction to make me a more interesting person, at least.
I think I do read novels. I think it's taken me a little while, or I'm currently trying to think about what novels I actually enjoy reading, because I think it's very difficult to read philosophy all day and then to read like challenging literature. And I started to ask myself, like, why did I or do I feel the pressure to like read challenging literature? And I think that part of this is just cultural. Like, I think moving to, my experience in Europe has like clarified to me like what is very American about myself. And I've actually realized that like the middle brow is like where I culturally am at home. Like I don't actually want to read like Proust or whatever, and and so I think part of that is cultural, like the kind of aesthetics that I appreciate, but then the other part of it is just like when I'm not working, how do I want to spend my time? And I think finding good novels that are at that level, or sometimes a little bit more challenging, that don't make me unhappy, is kind of what I'm interested in. I'm in so I went through a period where I was reading not a lot, but some American literature, like early 20th century literature, and then I went through a period of reading a lot of like rom-coms, like the kind of books like Marianne Keyes is like the mistress of rom-coms, and some rom-coms are not great, but like some like hers are basically books no one takes seriously, I'm convinced, because like women like them. And they're actually wonderful and easy to read books with good character development. And then I'm in a vampire book reading club with my friends, and so we reread Twilight.
Hell yeah.
And had a meeting about it. And then
I like the idea of a meeting about it, like an emergency meeting with Twilight.
We had a meeting about Twilight. And now we're reading Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I haven't read before. So, awesome. And we're gonna meet about that too. So that's what I'm up to.
Well,
I'm currently slowly working my way through Bluebeard by Vonnegut, which I'm really liking. I don't know. I don't like to go back to the question. I don't like reading fiction for philosophical themes in like an overt or like explicit way, right? As much as it can be like expansive literature and art. Like I don't like the didactic stuff so much. But like that's just not. I just think that it is a different function. As
art in general too. Have you ever tried to watch any of those films that are like philosophy, like they're about philosophy? what's the one, The Waking Life or whatever? Maybe the worst single film ever made in human history.
Claim.
You know what? I'm not gonna say you're wrong, but like, damn, bro, like there's some really bad movies.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad.
I will say, no, just to be fair to everybody, when I was an undergrad, I was like blown away by that movie. I was like, wow.
Yeah, you're like, wow, oh my God, Richard Linklater rotoscoped Alex Jones. This is brilliant.
And then I visited it one day, I don't know, a couple years ago, and I was like, I can't. It's so cringy. I can't.
Embarrassing.
Take it. So yeah. Let the cringe flourish, I guess, but it is what it is.
Kill the part of you that cringes.
Yeah, that's
Haven't
right.
been fighting the cringe.
Yeah, we've been working on this. Yeah, cringe is the mind killer.
Yeah, I mean, I basically, like, in general, like, the reason I don't like didactic art and being told, or like any like literalist art of any kind, is I just feel like that's my day job.
Yeah.
And I don't like being told what to believe. Like, it has to feel like a different form, because it's never gonna, like, if you try to tell me what to think about the art in the art, then I start thinking it's stupid, because that's what I do for a living, is to like make arguments and like systematize ideas. So then suddenly I'm not impressed, you know?
I can make arguments. I'm not as good at making art. Right?
It kills the magic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it kills the
a
magic.
different thing. They have different aims.
Okay, let's move on. You have 5 episodes in your series on liberalism. Nozick, Pettit, Rawls, Liberalism and Policing, Locke, Hayek. What have you learned from these episodes, and what are the learning objectives for the audience for these episodes? What are the learning objectives?
Back to learning objectives.
Didn't think about the syllabus
I guess
no
like that.
shade, but this feels like another teacher wrote this question. Again,
What
no
should
shade.
the learning objectives for
yeah.
liberalism be as a whole? Is let's follow.
I mean, I do think there is a kind of general ambition we have with that series, which is to take liberalism seriously and not just to be like, oh, libs. You know, like it's very common on the left to just use the word lib and then you dismiss it immediately.
Which is correct, but it would be better to have a more substantive foundation for the critique.
Yeah. Well, it's correct in a sense. I mean, yeah, it's also actually an evolution for me. It's not that I was like just always going around being really hostile to liberalism, but I've started to take aspects of that tradition more seriously as a result of the podcast.
I think I can remember you in like the mid 2010s being pretty
I was a
flippant.
menace.
A menace, yeah.
No, seriously, like
Owen's like,
Owen was so cool.
Not do a flashback. Yes, I was a menace.
someone would say something that I considered to be liberal, and I would just, yeah. Let's not. We don't have to go into it.
They didn't say it again. I think, I feel like, when it was Lillian, I think, who first suggested this series. And if I remember correctly, one of the things you said you wanted to do with the series is like, well, liberalism has become hegemonic, so partially we want to understand how and why it still secures those conditions by looking at how people argued for it, looking at its tensions and antinomies. I believe that's what we did in the liberalism and policing episode.
Yeah.
Probably. I don't remember if Hayek's a part of the series, but he probably should be. But so we wanted to look at the darker sides of liberalism with the Hayek, but the Rawls episode, I think we were really not sympathetic, but we were generous with it.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I mean, the guy has a big brain.
He's a big brain guy.
Thought about certain things, so you have to actually do the work. If you're
Rawls is a
going
good
to-
I think, of why it is important, is because I mean, leftists, especially Marxists, are interested in freedom and equality. So, the dominant way that those concepts have been hashed out, have been captured, have the hegemonic articulation of them lies in liberalism, and you kind of have to grapple with it.
Yeah.
And not just in the sense of destroying it, but if we both have these commitments to these two ideas, right, to equality and to liberty, I think it's really important to, and we want to distinguish a left version of that from a purely liberal one, which presumably may include some elements of what the liberals meant as well. But I think you have to do that work you have to parse them. You have to try to figure out, where the distinction lies.
Yeah, I think that's helpful because for me it's been really helpful to clarify, like, I think maybe to sort of give all these leftists running around talking about libs, and like, again, I think that's basically correct. But that can give one the wrong impression, though, namely that like liberalism has nothing of value to offer, that any genuine left program is going to be non-liberal, anti-liberal, or illiberal. And
Or
this
has to like get rid of like freedom of speech or freedom of
right, yeah,
association
exactly.
or whatever. Like,
And I think it's been really
that's
clarifying to like, go, okay, what is it about this liberal tradition that I do think is valuable and worth trying to rescue or critique and to rescue in some manner? And what are its like bases, its fundamental bases often that make the attainment or actualization of these genuinely good values or principles like impossible, in fact. And to me, like it ends up being again like the extent to which like everything in liberalism winds up being subordinated to the basic imperative of capital accumulation, that everything else kind of falls away. But I think that it's helpful for leftists not to be like, oh, I hate liberalism, I'm illiberal, fuck freedom of speech. Like this is
Whatever they think, I
is
want to think
bad,
the opposite.
right? Yeah. No, I think we on the left should have a more subtle and sophisticated relationship to liberalism than just like outright, open hostility in the manic Owen, manic earlier Owen variety.
The mid-2010s.
And I've been there too, totally, right? Yeah.
I
Yeah,
know
I've,
for at least
I've also been there, but
Yeah.
I
like
think I feel like I don't know, something happened to me where I realized like how is it possible that academics on the whole can be so hostile and critical to liberalism, critical of, and people on the left are so hostile and critical to it, and yet the politics of most people inhabiting these environments are basically liberal in character, like both in terms of strategy and general ideological like way of responding to the ideological like debates of our time. And so I started realizing that liberalism is it's actually too easy to criticize it, and I find myself being frustrated with that. I don't know how to describe this much better because it's just I think I've said this in episodes on liberalism, but like if it were so easy to criticize, then why is it so hegemonic and difficult to displace? So there's like these. I think it's both people think they're making they're claiming easy victories that they shouldn't claim, but then also I started to doubt where a lot of the criticisms were coming from, especially when they started to like attack the things that are actually not bad about liberalism, like a kind of cynical view toward it or an instrumental view of it or something like this. And so I guess I don't know what I've learned, but I do believe it makes up the vast majority of the ideological space. And
Yes.
it doesn't seem like that when you are a professional philosopher. It seems much more embattled. It seems much easier to criticize than it actually is. And that was kind of what motivated that. I think what I've learned is that I don't think liberalism can talk very meaningfully about social transitions or epochal social changes. And I think that's mostly because they can't deal with a justification for a changing class structure. I think this is the basis of like the Marxism's criticism.
I think that's true, and because the origin story it tells about itself is completely fictional and ahistorical.
Naturalizing, yeah.
It's the Smith story of some people started being really thrifty at one point and accumulating property
and also it claims every historical advance as its own, even if you look at the historical context and you see that liberals are on the wrong side. It's kind of like it's almost like a spirit that heads it wins, tails you lose. Oh yeah, maybe actual liberals were against some type of advance, but the advance happened, and that only happened because of liberalism.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's cool. But yes, I'm sure we're gonna do more episodes in What is Liberalism series and all that. So
should we move on to a couple questions about academia, and then we can? I don't know how long we want to stay. I feel like we didn't get through very many of our questions at all, and I'll start to skip around.
I also want to get a couple from the chat too.
I've got time. I can stick around long for the next whatever. But yeah, let's definitely move to the next section at least.
Should we just
I'm
let's move. Let's
still,
just let's signal when we want to stop.
Yeah, let's keep it going.
Okay, so I'm gonna maybe ask two questions about academia, and then because I don't want us to dwell too long on
Me
this
neither.
topic.
Yes,
And then I'll ask two
Thank you.
questions about real politics,
Thank
and then
you.
maybe we answer. Maybe then we answer some like philosophy questions.
Nice.
Ooh, yeah.
And you let me know maybe after the academia bit. You let us know if there's anything in the chat we should address. Okay, on academia. Long-time listener, first-time caller, big fan of the show. I was wondering if you had thoughts on the state of the left in academic philosophy. Has anything changed over the past few years? Are there reasons for optimism?
I mean,
Just
no.
Well, maybe I guess it's not the hard question.
Listen, good news.
What
Hope.
do I know?
Listen, we're all Bavarians here. Hope is not a condition for action, which is good news because there's no hope.
I just as a a preface even before we say anything, it is funny to me how inflated the idea that a lot of people have about the presence of leftists in like academic philosophy. I mean, to go back to what we were just saying a minute ago about liberalism, I would say it's 98% comprised of people that are broadly, whether they admit it or not, liberals. I don't know. Is that maybe that's I don't know. So it is.
Yeah,
what is
I would
our
not disagree with you.
Yeah, ranging.
what is our 2%?
And I think the remainder is like there's like 0.5% are like conservatives and like maybe 1.5% are like heterodox thinkers or like Marxists. Yeah.
So the question requires that context, right?
I guess also the context of what we mean by left academia. Clearly, we don't mean like mainstream liberalism because that's not necessarily aligned with left goals. I mean, the reason why I said this is a hard question because like any attempt you try to say something optimistic about academia, you just sound like a fool. Like, who would ever take that bet? I mean, I'm not even going to try to play devil's advocate.
So funny.
If someone were to play devil's advocate, they say, well, it does seem like Marx has broken containment a little bit. People are. I don't know about taking it seriously, but they're like, we can talk about Marx again.
The Marx revival, yeah.
Yeah, that's not wrong.
I don't know if that's conditions for optimism. Obviously, it matters the content of the revival.
There's been some thawing after the Cold War. After the Cold War kind of context, it took a while, but I do think it's true that it is a little more. I don't know. There's a little more receptive.
I find that
to Marxism.
students are more interested in
Marxism.
students. I don't know if that counts as optimism for academia, but undergraduates and graduate students, there's a hunger for it.
I also just do think that like a question like this requires like stepping back and thinking about like what is reasonable to expect from academia in the first place. It's not to just throw cold water on the fire, but like, whatever. It's a bourgeois institution of, we say knowledge production, but mostly subject formation and social gatekeeping, right? Like that's its basic social function. And it's like the case that this is something that exists, like when we talk about this, like mostly in the imperial core in the form that we're thinking and talking about, where there's like a lot of, I know a future question coming down the line, like middle class stagnation and just not very much class consciousness at all. So like, okay, so then some more people are teaching Marx than was the case 30 years ago. Like that's fine. I just don't see that as moving the needle very much. The real question would be like whether or not there's more interlinkages between like academics who consider themselves leftists and like actual on the ground organizing movement. And I know there is some of that. There's always been some of that. It still is a relatively minority thing. I'd love to see more, But.
I think that there isn't. I don't feel optimistic about left-wing academic philosophy, like as a group of people or outputs or a culture. I don't feel like very optimistic about that, mostly because the social incentives within it, I mean, Gil summarized it, but like very concretely, the social incentives within these institutions to go against the grain of like what market trends are literally demanding of your scholarship and the kind of like status gatekeeping, especially in the American academy, like the fancy school, like dominance of intellectual life is like really crazy. I didn't think I understood it to be that crazy until I like didn't live there anymore. But you look at like how like it's just not normal for schools to have that much clout and money and like it's bizarre. And
especially given the gap between
they put out Yeah. No, go ahead. The gap between.
Just the gap between them and work going on in all kinds of state schools across the country, or like the gap is not large. I mean, I don't even know if there is a gap, but everything accrues. All of the attention accrues to those people in those elite circles. Sorry, I didn't. Yeah, just.
Yeah. No. And it's like a winner take all model in a lot of cases. So like you can kind of capture an audience on a certain topic or if you get that tenure track job, maybe you can, draw some good grad students around you, but most of that's very decentralized and there's not a lot of research support. Like you can, you're not going to get money in the American Academy to like have a Marxist research center that's well funded or whatever. I think there's more with that in that respect. I think there is more of an opportunity in Europe. Not because I think the intellectual culture is healthier, but just because institutionally, I think it might be. I'm actually interested in doing this. I'm talking about it right now to like form an independent research hub and try to get some money for it. I think that might there might be something to be done, but for the most part, like the social incentives are cut against doing this. Like the amount of pigeonholing that people will do to you, the amount of like not taking you seriously or laughing at you, or you have to kind of like really believe in in like what you're doing to get through all that, and you have to be clear-sighted enough about it early on enough in your career, and otherwise so I just don't really. I wouldn't hold out hope that left-wing academics are going to get better. What I would recommend is that if you are left-wing and you want to like do research because you actually care about like providing knowledge to like that is socially useful, or building arguments that are socially useful, or just because you actually value the truth as opposed to being like drunk on ideology or whatever, then
that's a good
I think yeah. Then like I think it would be wise to seek out people who will tell you the truth about this and try to help you succeed. Like you have to kind of have some self-consciousness about what you are doing. That's maybe leading into a question on like wisdom to share regarding pursuit of a career in philosophical academia. I think that's my wisdom to share.
Yeah, I don't know if I have too much more wisdom to add, except to say, understand the nature of the beast you'll be entering into. It's very hard if you're, it's very hard to get, stable jobs and all of that. And I don't want to say that should dissuade you from pursuing graduate study. The wisdom I would actually share is do it because you fucking love it, and that it will enrich you to do it. I get why some people we need to start dissuading people from pursuing graduate study on utilitarian grounds, and I think there's some people who would do it even if they knew a job wasn't guaranteed at the other end of it. Okay. And I think it's important to kind of have that disposition. And
like I'm contingently employed in academia, and I have absolutely no regrets about doing my PhD in philosophy. It was an absolute necessity. Like, if you feel that way, I think you should. Like, it was a necessity. I had no choice. Like, there's not a single other thing I would have found tolerable to have done, like, in my late 20s, early 30s.
I do also. I agree with these things. I was just talking with someone else about this actually, and the thought that occurred to me is, academics love to talk about how hard it is. And on the one hand, I get it. It's, a really tight labor market, basically, is what we mean. There's often not very much in the way of, like, good protections, whatever. Even in the best of cases, you're not going to be particularly well compensated relative to other professionalization routes. It's also, we're not in the fucking coal mines. Like, it's actually not that hard. Also, right? Like,
sir, red socialist hegemony strategy. You were in the trenches.
Yeah, no, right? Like, so if you can get an institution to pay you to read books for a couple years, and you want to do that, fuck yeah, do that.
Got it.
But like, there is a little bit of like self-mythologization, persecution, and martyrdom complex that academics are guilty of. Don't let them tell you that it's like the hardest thing in the world. almost anyone could do this. It's a question of if you get lucky and if you have the correct disposition. And
Yeah,
that's
and if you
that's
learn in a good place, part of it's luck too. Like I had
very
the best
much. A lot of
time
it's luck.
imaginable doing my PhD. Like it was
Uh-oh.
amazing.
We've lost Lily.
Oh, we lost Lillian.
Let's see if she comes back.
But that was partly due to really good, like bunch of other like peers, a bunch of other grad students, including Gil, and I did it in the city of Chicago, greatest city in the world.
Hey-o.
It was just
I never left.
yeah, good stuff. You're smart.
All right.
I'm
I'm
currently
sure
in Boston,
Lillian's
so
going
I'm,
to be
Presumably
logging
Lillian will
back
come
in.
back.
yeah.
But do we want to try another question while she does it?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, let's. What do you all think about Georgism and the land value tax?
I have to admit, I don't have many thoughts.
I don't have any thoughts about this. Sorry to say.
I think the one thought I have is wow.
Yeah, you're looking for a specific answer, and I'm sorry I can't give it to you.
Sorry, I disappeared real
That's
quick.
It's all good.
It's okay. We were just saying. I think we're gonna jump maybe to some real politics questions.
Yeah, real politics.
You want to grab one for us?
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna stay away from the election stuff.
Smart.
Hi, I'm from Spain. Hello,
Oh, yeah.
comrades from Spain. Longtime listener of the pod. I enjoy listening because I study history and I like how you situate philosophers in their time and still make their ideas come to life in the present. Cool, thank you.
Good
Here in
compliment.
Spain, there's an organization trying to rebuild class power called Socialist Movement. One of their catchphrases is "Believe again that revolution is possible." So my question is, do y'all think revolution is possible? Do you think we can build up to it? What do you guys think?
Again, this feels like one of those questions that's hard because who wants to lay down their money?
Yeah.
In a way, yes, I want to say revolution is possible, but if you're going to ask us likely, I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to take that bet. At least,
Yeah.
it seems to me, yeah.
My question would be is, well, where's that revolutionary subject going to come from? Because I can't see in the moment how, like where it's lying. And so, I mean, that does not mean to say that it cannot form. I mean, the subject is formed, according to someone like Sartre, it's formed in the actual process of the upheaval. So I suppose, but I just don't see where the level of coordinate, like we are so unbelievably and effectively atomized and individuated that the basic elements of collective power at a really local level. We've gone over this before on the podcast. I mean, even bowling clubs. I mean, we don't have those even. We don't have, and it's part of why I think when there's some people, especially liberals, talking about there's might be like a civil war, like in the United States. I mean, you need factions to have civil wars. You need factions for revolutions. We don't have. There just isn't to me. And I don't want to sound defeatist about this because in my heart of hearts, like I actually do believe. I'll never stop believing that like socialist revolution is possible.
Hell yeah.
But I just see the fractured and fragmented and atomized like nature of social life, including the way, and I always bring this up, including the way our like built environment shapes our behavior and shapes our relationships with one another. Those things are very difficult.
It's tough to get over that.
Yeah.
To get over, like
Tough to get past that stuff.
Are the people in the suburbs going to rise up? Like I don't.
Well, as we said last episode, sometimes they need a bit of the stick.
Yeah.
I feel like it's weird as someone who works so much on utopia, but it's just why I'm a weird utopian, which is I just see so many of the constraints and so many of the frustrating limits on something like revolution.
Maybe that's why you have to work on utopia because
or
otherwise you'd be a defeatist. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that the conditions, maybe they never are ripe for revolution, but it's certainly, I think, from a practical scientific view, the conditions exceedingly are not ripe. But I guess the question would be, what is it you're imagining revolution entails? I mean, I hope you're not imagining only just like a revolution of one's internal spirit. I guess that's always possible. But, we're talking about revolution localized to a single nation. You're talking about a global revolution. Global revolution, I really don't see that on the horizon. So, yeah, I think it's important to believe it's still possible, but do that with the sort of the coldness of understanding why it is so hard for something like that to come about.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with all of this. I'm like, do I see anything like that happening in the near future? Like I said in the Rosa Luxemburg episode, like I don't even foresee getting healthcare anytime soon. So like I'm not foreseeing I'm not foreseeing the socialist revolution on the immediate
Maybe that's
horizon.
why the socialist revolution will happen.
Yeah, right,
That's
maybe.
fair. Maybe a version of the immiseration thesis.
But I like you both have said, like all three of you have said in various ways, like yeah, no, I think I will live my whole life and die believing in its possibility. I really will. I think it's
Yeah, I'm curious about maybe the vantage
it's an
from
orienting passion and a horizon for thinking and for activity. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'm curious, like from the vantage, maybe Lillian, since you live there and you're more plugged in, you might have more to say about it. But I guess I was thinking in a kind of North American centric there for a moment. I mean, I wonder how the situation looks in Europe. I feel like there's been more, although there was 2020 in the States, but France has recently, like, the turmoil in France has been real. I mean, like not just the Yellow Jackets, the Gilets jaunes, but also like the organizing and the demonstrations against the raising of the retirement age, like the masses of involvement, the degree of organization. I don't know. Maybe it looks different there, and there isn't the same. I think it is socially fractured and atomized, but not to the degree that North America is. I don't know what role that plays. I mean, I'm just curious. So, yeah, how does it look from the European vantage? At the same time, Europe has its own distinctively European regressive forces. So yeah.
I think that I don't know so much what to say about France, because it's interesting that I know, because you're from Canada, that's like the first country that comes to mind. I don't interact with like many French people, either in academia or just like socially. I think so.
They're pretty hermetic in their own universe, like academically.
Yeah, I think So first of all, I read the same articles that everyone else does about France, so I don't know if I have anything particular to say about that, about whether or not what kind of political opportunities are there. I think the ability for the left to kind of come together in that snap election was very impressive. So maybe there's something, but I did learn over time that when you're in the U.S., France seems like looms really large in your mind as like an important place in Europe. And France is not, I mean, it's a big country. Of course, it's important in the European Union, but like in terms of like what shapes European politics, it is very like hermetically sealed. Like I've never been invited to go to an event in France, and no one I know goes to academic events in France. Like the cosmopolitan places are very much like Germany, the Netherlands, UK, even Spain.
Well, part of that is people in France don't learn English, and that's like as a matter of principle.
So just in general, there's just like less movement back and forth. Like people go to Belgium, but they don't go to France anyway. So I think the most optimistic place.
I love how you're just taking this opportunity to just dig it, getting some digs at France. I mean, people go to Belgium. Like,
I mean, it is kind of like it is kind of well, because like in the American Academy or in like the North American Academy, like France just is like feels very important. Yeah. Like when I was in graduate school, I chose to learn French and not German, and then I went to Germany, and I'm like, wait, who's doing what? And like like there's just like, anyway, I think Spain is kind of the most promising place in Europe. I think that the fallout of the kind of left populist moment, Podemos, and the fracturing of that, and then there was like the Laclau and Moufian wing, and then there was Pablo Iglesias's wing, and then I think, I don't know, I might be getting this wrong. I think Pablo Iglesias's wing has kind of folded into Yolanda Diaz's wing, which is she's a trade union leader, and this is more of like a proper left-wing party. And they were able to defeat the far right in the last elections, from what I remember. And it seems like like in global public opinion, the Spaniards are like the most like left-wing people on the planet in terms of like a combination of social attitudes and economic attitudes. So I think Spain is like it's where the most political activity is happening. Elsewhere in Europe, I think things look pretty bleak. I think to me, Germany is like a lost cause, and I'm being glib, but like actually things are very bad there, I think.
Yeah.
The Dutch left, I think, is irrelevant for the time being. I think one of the worst things to happen in the past several years is Sweden joining NATO. I think that was just awful. I think the historic independence was something that the Swedish left was able to maintain, and it shows their weakening over the time as long as which is also like the result of like the increase in inequality has been the most in Sweden since the 90s and then relative to any other European country. So um their capitulation to like joining NATO and then like the rise of the right in Sweden is very concerning. And the UK is just a shithole at this
Yeah,
point
someone
politically.
someone in the chat
So
asked
good.
about what about Normal Island, and I have to assume that refers to the UK.
Yeah.
I was out, you know what,
like,
I will say this about the UK. Like, I think that the defeat of the left of the Labour Party, the reason I'm saying that is like the defeat of the left of the Labour Party was, I think, even more significant there than the defeat of Bernie in the US. Like the really the right wing of the Labour Party regained control, and I think it has had very negative effect on the
and
British left.
it was a more thorough purge too.
A purge, a
Yeah.
vicious purge,
A
yes.
vicious purge, yeah.
And then I think I was
God,
very,
it makes me
I've
fucking
been
blood
all
boil.
on balance very impressed by the British left's ability to mobilize around Palestine. Like I'm sure someone closer to it would have many frustrations and so on. But like what I saw there, like I went there to like a 1 million person demonstration in London, and I just think that overall the British left and the Irish left and the Spanish left have basically been clear on this in a way that is not true elsewhere in Europe at all. But that doesn't mean that's going to contribute to like a resurgence of the British left more broadly. It might be that this, yeah. Okay, that's all. That's not. I don't.
Yeah.
It's not a good prognosis.
Fuck.
Yeah. So yes,
Gil,
still believe.
I take back what the point about Beauvoir. I need the hope.
You need the hope. All right, sorry.
Yeah.
I need to
Opium.
like hook up the hopium machine to my.
All right, well, I'll get you some
body.
opium later, Bill.
Okay, let's move on to philosophy questions, shall we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. There was other real politics questions, but I kind of feel like some of them were.
Yeah, it's a philosophy.
Very,
it's a
very
philosophy
specific.
pod. We should get to.
Are there any convincing arguments linking Marxist philosophy to Stoicism? Are these even compatible? This is a good question.
I'm not like. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I saw that question, so I haven't done any work in Stoicism, so I saw that question beforehand, and I just started reading about Stoicism, and partially because I didn't want to say anything,
Like, obviously wrong.
stupid. Yes,
I get my knowledge of Stoicism from Hegel, so that's.
Yeah, so I didn't want to say no. There can be no compatibility because Stoicism is about just control of yourself. Like, no, Stoicism has a whole metaphysics, so I can understand where this question is coming from. It is a type of materialist doctrine of the relationship between laws and bodies and all of that. So I can see someone working something out, but at least from the little that I read about Stoicism, if Marxism isn't simply a materialist claim about ontology and relationship between bodies, but is also about the historical specificity of social relations and all of that. I think eventually you're going to hit a type of roadblock. You'd either have to lose what makes Stoicism interesting in order to make it compatible with Marxism, or reduce Marxism to what Marx and Engels would call a kind of dumb materialism. So I think I can see why that question would emerge. So that's like my sophisticated answer. I get it. They're both interested in a type of materialist ontology. But yeah, maybe Gil knows.
I don't know too much more about Stoicism than you do, but I will say that just first blush thought, like my Marxism and the Marxism that interests me is completely hedonic and hedonistic. I mean when I long for like a socialist world, it's one in which there is just unfettered circulating pleasures and joys and happiness, and I don't see
Oh yeah.
I mean, I really like that. This is what
To do a
the
callback to Owen, to have the joy of a dog in Chicago
yeah, man.
basking
Yeah.
in the sun.
That would be
Basking in the
tight.
sun.
Like, I'm sure that it is like reductive and unfair to think of Stoicism in these like really sort of like 101 level terms as being anhedonic or against pleasure. But yeah, that's my 101 level
Yeah,
insight here. Is as a Marxist, I'm very into fucking joy and love. Actually,
you're brave to
I
say so.
think
thanks.
Stoicism is I think there might be, I don't know if it's compatible like in all of its like meta philosophical commitments, but I do think that there's a role for thinking about Stoicism in your relationship to politics. So, like, another
Mm-hmm.
question earlier was,
Mm.
how do you get sick, tired, overworked, and frustrated people to work in the construction of socialism? Where do we find time, fortitude, material support? Dunno,
That's a great
but
Yeah,
question.
tough.
Yeah.
I do think that there's a
Mm.
I think that any serious movement that is trying to build socialism in this century has to have a combination of like zealots and people like and people capable of like absorbing all of the hits that are going to
Yeah.
draw
The
other
fortitude.
people
Yeah,
to
yeah.
away, bring them away, and kind
It'd
of
be
make people's
disciplined.
relationship with the movement
Yeah.
oscillate. And I think that I think that this isn't like a vanguardist thing. I just think it's a fact that like the people who are willing to be like deep into left-wing politics as their like life world are zealots. They're not your ordinary person, even if
Yeah.
ordinary people are sympathetic with you. The people who are willing to spend their lives doing that. And I think it behooves those people to understand that they're at the far ends of a normative distribution of behaviors and to attenuate their emotional um, reactions to things
Yeah.
in a way that is like feels responsible for
Right.
keeping it together.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a lot of currently on the people who think of themselves as left wing, I think there is a lot of like just emotional lashing out and narcissism and bad behavior. This is my
Yeah.
experience on the left. I've also had some nice
And a lack of
experiences, but
fortitude in
like
the face of,
lack of fortitude.
adversity.
Mm-hmm.
So the people, it might be useful to think about Stoicism as like a tool for reacting to how other people react to things.
Yeah.
Because
Emotional
the way that people get
self-regulation.
swept, yeah, self-regulation. You
Hmm.
maybe it's not Stoicism you need. Maybe it's just like kind of
Being an
normal
adult.
But it's in that orbit though.
psychology
Like
of
it's in that
self-regulating
yeah.
emotions. But
It's in that orbit. Like I was reading, I was teaching Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail the other day, and he's got this line about the four steps in in a civil rights action, and one of the important steps is what he calls self purification. And what he means by this self purification is how we prepare ourselves subjectively to accept blows, like to accept hits, to accept physical like abuse, and to have like a calibrated, courageous relationship, like emotional relationship, even in response to those, in response to that. And obviously taught this before. I'd read it a bunch of times, but I was really moved by that concept of self purification. And I think it is because
Mm-hmm.
there are subjective elements that are really important, and maybe that's where Stoicism could be useful. There are subjective elements that are important in like Marxist politics, left politics, whatever. And so part of that subject preparation, subject discipline, subject for auto self subject formation or auto subject formation as a kind of collective entity and as individuals. Like I could see a real role for that. I mean, I think that Martin Luther King is absolutely right
Yeah.
that whether you agree with the particular nonviolence the tactic that he's advocating for, that stealing oneself in a way like that is it's not. I don't think it's marginal. To
Yeah, I think
effective
it's a good
politics.
example. Yeah, the only other thing I would add is, yeah, I get frustrated when people have a surface level reading of MLK and the Civil Rights Movement as they're the passive ones,
Yeah, yeah,
who don't know how to engage in activity. But it's very clear. Imagine how you have to fortify yourself to remain committed to the mission that you have given yourselves in the face of hoses and dogs and all of
Dogs,
that. Most of us would lash
batons to the
out,
head. Yeah.
and all of that. And so that just shows, I think it is a part of his philosophy. And so it just shows you haven't actually understood what is going on there. And there is something to possibly extract. Yeah. Oh,
I'll say
okay.
one
So-
more thing. Like,
Talk yourselves into
I think
stoicism.
that you have to think about what it is that you actually want out of politics. And I think this is very difficult for people to do, myself included. Like, there is a way. So you're all aware of like the hipster turn toward the activist turn and like hipsterdom. Okay, so
Yes.
there's okay, so we're living in a moment of popular culture in which like being an activist is actually quite fashionable. And I think that one thing that can be demoralizing for someone who is really committed to sort of socialist politics and wanting to think about how to do that, whether intellectually or practically, is that you sense that the world around you is not actually on the same page with you. Like, you know that you start to like realize with some experience that the commitments people have are very hollow. You might get disillusioned by some people, or some people sincerely have commitments and they move away from them because they get realistic over time. There's a lot of things that can happen. And I think being clear on what you actually want out of it is probably the place to start with thinking through like how you can like self-regulate your feelings. Because if what you primarily want is a social circle, that's not a good enough reason to weather those storms. You're not going to.
Yeah.
And you can find there's easier ways to make friends.
Or there's whatever. That's what I would say is like have a like the internal look, the look inward to like what you actually want and what your goals are is probably the most difficult thing to accomplish. And I think once you do that, trying to like everything else, what is necessary, unnecessary, taking blows or whatever, becomes more clear. So anyway, do you guys think phenomenology and Marxism could ever be effectively acquainted? For example, understanding the lived experience of the proletariat as a way to empirically ground interventions.
So, I think yes, but I'll add a caveat. So, like, first of all, like, I think the way that people throw around the term lived experience in popular discourse these days is extraordinarily frustrating. Both because there is a real philosophical concept here that people are willing to abuse and not take seriously, and because it is cynically invoked by people doing reductive
preach.
versions of like identity politics, right? And, our Taiwo line. That said, if you do track that historical concept, the philosophical concept, this goes back to Lukács, right, and the standpoint of the proletariat, which then is, picked up by Nancy Hartsock in elaborating the feminist standpoint. Standpoint epistemology was explicitly a Marxist project of grounding epistemic knowledge production in particular forms of subjectivity that I think is really important, and anything outside of that is going to be like, I don't know, God's eye view nonsense. That said, I don't think that it works to invoke individual perspectives, subject positions, identities, formations, whatever, in this phenomenological way without our favorite concept of social totality. Because then I think we fall into our like infinite play of difference kind of problems here. I think maybe one way of answering your question is like phenomenology can only really be useful in generating social knowledge if it's tied to a Marxian project that keeps in view something like the view of the social whole. That's what I think.
Yeah. I mean, and there are plenty of ways that the experience of workers or experience of the proletariat have been, I think, like really interesting and richly analyzed that are not phenomenological. Like E.P. Thompson's, E.P. Thompson has done that, I think. I think Rancière does like really good work on that in an earlier part of his work where he's not doing phenomenology, but he's interested in like the aesthetic production taking place amongst people in working class organizations in the 19th century. They were putting on plays, they were doing all kinds of things that were not directly related to just militating. But yeah, I think the problem, the obvious incompatibility, not incompatibility, the obvious tension is that phenomenology is always going to be grounded in and tied to the transcendental ego, or it could be Dasein or whatever. It's a subject-oriented way of doing philosophy, which is fine, but it has then you have there's a lot of work to do to connect it to the totality, social totality, the way that Gil is saying. And the other thing I will just say is that phenomenology historically has an object problem. I can't remember. I brought this up before. I can't remember what I said before, but it would have to get away from analyzing desks, windows, drawers, fucking trees, trees outside your window, pencils, the most anodyne, dorky,
Here
academic
in the cafe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's
When
part
will
of
he
actually
show
what.
up?
Yeah, I mean, that's what makes Sartre really interesting for me is that, he's taking elements of phenomenology, and I mean, Fanon does this to an extent too, and bringing it to bear on revolutions and like things that are important, or even just like social hostility or social phenomena that you might not normally take that seriously, like a fucking bus queue. I mean, that's not strictly a phenomenological analysis, but Sartre, I think, is really instructive for how to make phenomenology do interesting things in relationship to Marxism by just switching up the object of analysis towards something that might actually tell you something about anything, rather than just about, I mean, granted, I have a soft spot for the first time I read The Phenomenology of Perception, like Merleau-Ponty's Phenomenology of Perception, a book I really loved when I read it when I was, it was a long time ago. And it was that moment where he was describing when like both hands, like when your hands touch one another.
Oh, the classic, yeah.
And you're both subject and object. Like, you know what I mean? You at that moment are both the subject
That
and
rules.
the object. And my brain completely melted.
Yeah. That's a big moment. I agree.
That's a big
I
moment
was
for me.
impressed,
So
yeah.
I just got to give it its flowers for that moment.
Yeah, I think it would have to be. I think I'm repeating what you all have said. A phenomenology grounded in a type of social theory and a type of aim. I'm actually reading a really interesting book on Lukács. Making the claim that history and class consciousness. Lukács is offering a phenomenology
Yeah.
in the reification essay, the method on the problem of organization, and what is orthodox Marxism, I believe it's called. And for him, what he tries to do is not just a phenomenology that excavates lived experience, but he wants to understand how the structured totality of capitalism interpolates and creates a type of subject. And so he wants to get at the objective constraints and organizing principle of the relationship of object to subject and not just subject to object. And so when you're doing when you're doing like
That's a great...
that real shit phenomenology, I think it could have something.
Yeah.
But if it's what Gil said about the vacuity of what lived experience is turned into, I'm not
or
sure.
Or if it's just eidetic reductions, to the end.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, we're not doing those. Sorry.
The two,
I mean, I
two
think
forms of idealist
the-
relapse.
I feel like it can be useful. I don't think there's something like that's in principle, like incompatible with phenomenological analyses, but and Marxism. Like, I think about the people that I liked reading as an undergraduate or even in graduate school. Like, I remember Iris Marion Young's Throwing Like a Girl essay when I was an undergrad.
Great
made a
essay,
big impression on me. It's a great essay. There are many others like that. But I do think that discourse tends to decompose into a self-contained way of looking at the world. And so these requirements are not obviously always met, that you have to be connected to a broader worldview, a social theory of structure and social reproduction and totality, if you like that as much as we do. But so I think that's not always obvious to me, but I don't think there's a reason it can't be. So I guess I would agree with that. I would say the same about any subject-oriented discourse. I think I would say the same thing about most Foucauldian projects. I would say the same thing about a lot of psychoanalytic projects. I just don't think the problem of the subject or subjectification is the starting point of how I think about anything. I think it's the result about how I think about things. And so I think in that way, a lot of that stuff seems upside down to me, but not because I couldn't be into it. Yeah.
Nice.
Does that make it?
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay. Ooh, this is a good one. I like this one. Okay, let's do a few more. I think we could call it maybe in 20 minutes or so. Okay.
Yeah, maybe half hour.
So, but there are some. Are there any problems the left faces today that derive from bad philosophy? Not problems that
I haven't
drive.
seen that question.
from simply not having the strength to carry out a vision, but could actually be solved by being better philosophers, reading key texts more rigorous or dynamic thinking. So, is there anything that philosophers are fucking up or have fucked up? And is there anything we could do better or advise other people to do better philosophically?
I mean, don't. I mean, the first thing just is quite simple, which is don't get too captured by novelty. I mean, this is another thing I feel like we've come back to in this like on the podcast, which is that the old left was actually has like a ton to teach us and is not like inherently worse because it didn't deploy the concept of intersectionality in the way that that it is now or something. So like the oldies are goodies, man. Don't spend time with that stuff and don't just throw it away.
I think my kind of polemic answer is here. It feels like the obvious and mostly right thing to say is none of the problems of the left can simply
be traced to philosophy.
That's obviously the first one. That's the important.
Yes,
that's
all
the
right.
first
So
important.
I would love to
point.
claim credit, but we're not that
We're
important.
not that important.
However, I do think doing philosophy well cultivates a type of disposition that can be really useful, which is not just taking arguments seriously, but doing the work of analyzing the world and breaking it down and putting it back together in a sensible, coherent way. And so I do think problems of the left of not being able even to articulate and understand even what your opponents might think, how they got there, why they think their conclusions are reasonable. I mean, that's why the episode on Hayek, almost everything Hayek believes is antithetical to what I believe. But I actually learned a lot of seeing like, okay, so this is actually the worldview that would make this make sense, that would make
With
this
Hayek,
plausible.
yeah.
And so, it's not that you become convinced, but I think there's a type of disposition and care that you'd want at uncertain. There's our boy
Harold.
Harold!
Let's go.
Harold.
Look at him. Look at the
Segments
absolute
of-
fucking
Oh my
boy,
God.
dude.
Yeah,
that's the mascot
disdain,
right
the
there.
disdain on his face.
Yeah, he's so
He's like, I heard
contemptuous.
y'all talking about Hayek.
Yeah, Harold's a
Yeah,
Leninist. I just feel Harold's a Leninist.
He is a Leninist.
Yeah.
Harold's
And
hungry. That's what's happening. Excuse me.
Hey,
He's
Leninists,
How long have you been doing this? I thought.
Leninists stay hungry though.
Oh shit.
Yeah. Oh,
Sorry, Will.
so maybe the bad things that come from having bad philosophy is not even knowing the presuppositions you yourself are committed to, so you don't even understand the very actions you're undertaking or the view that you're committed to. Again, there are objective explanations for that, but having a lack of clarity on even what it is you're committed to, I think, can only lead you astray.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was thinking of like when you said don't develop a fetish for novelty, Owen. I thought you were speaking like content wise. Because like they're like I'm just thinking of like the bad habits of continental theory from the past like 20 years, and like the fetish for the new is one of them.
I meant that too. I meant that as well.
You meant that as well. No, I know you meant that as well. I just wanted to draw it out, right?
No, yeah, I'm glad.
Like, how many papers have I seen where it's just like we're towards a new theory of the blah blah blah, and I'm like, oh my god! First of all, why are we always towards? Can we have the new theory? And second of all,
Can we get there?
can we fucking get there? Why is it always a prolegomena? And then also like I don't know if we need a new the new concept, the new category, the new one of my faves, Deleuze, defines philosophy as the creation of concepts, and like I get why he says that. But also, like, it's given rise to, like, a cottage industry of people who think that, like, coming up with a new name for a phenomenon or developing a new conceptualization of something is in and of itself always a good thing. And I'm just not convinced that that's automatically the case.
Yeah, we want to keep the neologisms to an absolute
Let's keep the
minimum. When
neologisms.
they're necessary, but we want to really limit.
They have to at least objectively hook into reality
They
somewhere.
have to capture something
Yeah.
that has changed in reality, and that's why we need the new word.
I do also want to, repeating the caveats that Will threw up before, and also maybe like the relationship between historical development, political movement, and philosophical work or reflection. Like, I think philosophy comes pretty late on the scene. Hegel's probably right about that. It's not driving the bus of history most of the time. But again, there are bad habits in philosophical circles and discourses, and one of them I think is like again a fetish for like horizontalism, decentralization.
Yeah, that's a big
Like I do think
problem.
that we could like trace that back into like historical developments in the 20th century, sure, but like it does get like reified in philosophical circles and then trickles down into certain sorts of like movements where people are like, yeah, wary of. Stable organization, leadership.
Yeah, leadership. That's one thing actually. We could use some good like thinking about leadership, and by that I mean we should read C.L.R. James and Lenin.
Yeah.
Right? But you know what I mean? Like,
correct.
Need some refreshing thoughts, grounded in again, not obsessed with the novelty, grounded in them.
Yeah.
That allow us to, I don't know, change our philosophical disposition towards leadership and. Well,
Yeah.
I think that a bad philosophical habit is a reflection of some of the stuff I said earlier, because I think part of the obsession with novelty, both as like a topic in philosophy and as like something to be like, it's amazing how the obsession with novelty is like something to be admired coincides with like pressures to do novel things
Totally.
as a result of like, how market pressures and how to publish. I think
Right.
that like coincidence between those things is very bizarre, and the fact that people don't think about it more critically I find very strange.
It's all pre-established harmony. This is the best of all possible worlds. Let's go back to sleep.
Yeah, it's crazy. But I think that philosophy, especially continental philosophy, but I don't know if the analytics are as guilty of this, but it has a very like vindicatory way of like telling its own story. So like first there was this problem, and then we superseded this problem, and then there was this new problem, and then we superseded this problem, and then this conflict between these philosophers happened, and then we realized that like, and so by the time you get into conversations about most of this stuff, everyone is presupposing all of these like landmines, like things you can't think and things that couldn't be true because the way the discourse has evolved is like it just couldn't be true because we've already decided that we're past it now. I think that is like a profoundly toxic way of thinking. I think the toxic way of thinking on the more analytical side is that they seem to think that like the height of philosophical like accomplishment can be, you find the kind of logical gap, which is a philosophical accomplishment, but then the thing that I think is not good is that they seem to think that a million conclusions follows from making a particular point. So like once I've made this point and I've inserted my argument in there, a lot is supposed to fall out of that. Like it's supposed to commit everybody to so much. So a lot to me, an analytical argument seems like very implied, as opposed to argued for, despite the rigorousness of like the attempt to make the reasoning transparent. What I'm supposed to be committed to after that remains kind of like, I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying. And I just think that
presupposed or asserted.
Presupposed, asserted. I appreciate like when the moves get made, but I don't like that way of kind of leaving the political or like bigger meta-theoretical content like for me to guess at. Like I'm supposed to be.
That's my pet peeve. Yeah, I've said this before too. This is my pet peeve.
I don't like that. So I think it kind of makes. I think that's conservatizing. But I don't know what else to say about that.
Cool.
Okay, let's do one on dialectic, shall we? I feel like we could either we might close out about this or maybe do one more after. But because like 4 or 5 people asked us to talk about dialectics. So in a group,
what have we done?
What have we been doing? Okay,
never
so
started
after
that
stupid idiot making this dumb series. It's my fault.
After listening to all 6 episodes on dialectics in various contexts, please answer what the heck is dialectics, and is there an alternative word or phrase that means the same thing? Someone else said that they started to notice when reading on dialectics that there was a similarity between that and complex systems theory, and there's been some back and forth between system theorists and dialecticians. Do we have any thoughts on the relations between those things? Gadamer on hermeneutical spiral as a way of engaging a dialectical process that revises prejudice to a more correct connection with the reality of the other. Okay, so I'm going to rephrase these slightly and just like, one, what do we think dialectics is? And then two, are there any like something like Gadamer or systems theory? Are there other ways of approaching making a method that are not I don't know, like
Yeah.
that are not what
Yeah.
we have discussed so far, probably.
Yeah.
Gadamer was the one that was pointed out.
Yeah. Yeah,
What do you
I was actually talking to a mutual friend of me, Gil and Owen. I don't think you've gotten to meet Jacob Singer yet, Lillian. He's our friend who
Shouts out.
dissertation on Hegel,
Shout
brilliant
out.
guy,
Brilliant.
all of that. And so I told him about this question, and he's kind of like, "Man, I don't know what you're gonna do about that one." And so I don't know if I have a direct answer, but I have, an answer of like why it's hard to answer what dialectics is, because the role of the dialectic in Plato, in Aristotle, in Kant, in Hegel, in Marx, it actually turns out it's taking place at different levels. So you
Yeah.
can think of dialectics as a type of argumentation of, A, counterpoint B, and then what do you get from that, that sort of relationship? Or dialect is a mode of presentation, a mode of presenting a type of claims, or dialectics is about, sort of a subjective experience of engaging with what's not myself, and then, having that tension, working through it, etc., raising it to a higher level, but leaving behind what is dead and what is living. But also there's a sort of a metaphysical claim about dialectics, that the nature of reality is in fact dialectical, that nature is dialectical and moves through these contradictions. And so, those aren't actually all collapsible into one another.
Right.
And so there isn't simply one concept of dialectics that moves through history, is I guess what I'm saying. And so it will depend on the text that we're reading when we're trying to answer that question, what is dialectics? And of course, you have Adorno doing his own thing, trying to, not actually end up in conclusions, vigorously so. So that's where
Yeah, that's really helpful. I'd say that like I personally like am not particularly um, attached to or fond of like the metaphysical version of talking dialectics, right? That like the nature of reality is such that it moves through contradictions or spontaneously develops itself like that. Um, for various reasons. I just don't have much sympathy for that. I think I prefer to think of dialectics as an attempt methodologically to avoid dogmatism, to avoid being dogmatic, which means something like recognizing the revisability of your premises in the course of how things unfold in arguments or investigation, in the course of investigation. That's pretty broad, But I mean, like, I was thinking, how fun was it that like we did our most recent "What is Dialectics" episode on Bhaskar and did not use the word dialectics at all. But I think
did the damn thing.
we just did the thing, right? And the way that comes up in Bhaskar's work and in the episode as we described is it's something like, how the normative value judgments that I have that make possible my theoretical investigation into the nature of things turn out then to be things that get reshaped in the course of that investigation, and then we're kind of off to the races, right? And that sort of is an endless process. And an endless process that hopefully doesn't sort of crystallize into like a dogmatic position once and for all, but remains revisable. And that's, again, annoying to say, but like I think this is something like that has to be right, which is why like more straightforward attempts at definition like all kind of fall apart. Like this is the problem with like Hegel's dialectics is thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Because no, it's not actually. Like literally, it's not. Like on the page, it doesn't work like that a lot of the time. But more
there are
important,
unresolved movements.
There
in
are.
Hegel, and sometimes there are four things.
Sometimes it's more.
And
Yeah.
sublation is not synthesis.
Right, exactly, right. But I think that's right. That's a bad picture of it because that's a dogmatic picture. And Hegel would be the first to say that, like, oh my God, you found the schema for like thinking. No, you didn't. That's a dogmatic posit. Thinking is activity that remains open-ended.
Yeah, I would say too, as far as the I mean, this relates, I guess, to the Gadamer point too. I think there are really interesting connections between the idea of like the hermeneutic circle, and dialectic, but it's only the part of dialectic that is on the theoretical side, the interpretive side, right? And I think this is like both the strength and the weakness of a lot of hermeneutics is that I think hermeneutics does Gadamer and Ricoeur actually provide a really, really good and true way to understand what it means to understand something that you did not previously understand. Like what it means to learn something new, like how to integrate, how to, I always go back to this language from Ricoeur of like that you have to actually divest something, you have to unlearn something to integrate something genuinely new. It has to change you in a certain way cognitively. And I think that relationship between what's identity and difference, or what you already understand and what is foreign and other, and that relationship, that spiraling relationship where they interact with one another and you find ways to latch on to something you don't understand using what you do understand, but not in a way where you just absorb it and like subsume it into what you. That to me is absolutely brilliant. To me the problem with, and this becomes an issue for, like, that's a great theory of reading, but the problem is that when it comes to social analysis, I think hermeneutics is just, and the idea of the hermeneutic spiral is a really limited way. Well, it's not just that, it doesn't tell you very much about the other side of what dialectics is, the tradition of dialectical thinking is interested in, is the extent to which reality is dialectical. It's not just an interpretive exercise that a subject engages in. Now, I agree, I don't go all the way with the metaphysical reality of the universe is explained through dialectics, but I do think that dialectics is an essential conceptual tool for understanding how a social totality functions. A determinate relationship between the parts, even the most granular parts of that society, and the whole, which they mutually determine one another. It's also useful for understanding how opposition, or what appears to be opposition, appears even to be promising opposition to a given society, like leftist, anti-capitalist projects, anti-racist projects, various different social movements can appear to be as if they were something other or different to the society they're opposing, and from a certain vantage point, from a dialectical vantage point, you end up seeing that actually that kind of opposition was an integral part of the way that social whole works. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, or it comes to be integrated in the same way that like the hippie movement or something, or I don't know, social movements have this way of getting integrated into the social whole. Yeah. And I just think dialectics is a useful way of understanding that relationship between part and whole, between what seems to be other and what already exists and what already is, and their interactions with one another. And that happens on all these different planes, but yeah.
That's a really powerful answer. I feel like one word, I was going to try to think about a word and that you could use instead of dialectics. I don't really have a good explanation for this, but I have thought in my life that maybe emergent properties, like in plain language, could be a good word for talking about what you are talking about when you're doing this kind of work. I don't know if that's completely satisfying.
I can see that. It's tough because it just resists definition and word. It resists just being a word that you can define. I was like, I couldn't find another word like for dialectics, like the method, but like what you are thinking about that might be.
Yeah,
anyway. I think that's right, actually. Yeah.
Sorry, my polemical thing is, if dialectics is what we've been saying, I actually think stay as far away from using the word as possible. Nice. Because oftentimes people just say, it's dialectical, but the point of dialectics is the demonstration of it. And that's why you can have like the Bhaskar episode where we don't say the word at all. You just do it. And so I have tried to train myself out of simply saying it's dialectical, because usually I say that when I don't actually know what the process and linkage is. And just like, I might seem wrong, but also dialectically, aren't I actually right? And that's not. Yeah,
that's a really good point. That, to me, that's the most important point, actually, and it's one that Hegel makes in the Encyclopedia and elsewhere, which is that dialectics is not a method, right? So other people have, the critical, let's say, critical transcendental method in Kant or something, right? It is not a method or a way of doing it. It is, watch me do it. I'm going to do a bunch of moves here. Watch this, okay? Well, all that's dialectics. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's watch the way that this thinking unfolds, and it's because I think his issue with method there is that a method is something you apply to subject matter, and it's almost kind of forced externally. It has an external relationship to the thing you're understanding. You're like, okay, I've
Right.
devised a method. Now I'm going to apply it to this set of phenomena, social phenomena or ideas, right? I'm going to apply it there, but it doesn't. That's a bad method because the method then is external. It isn't developed imminently from out of the thing you're trying to
Doesn't capture the
understand.
real movement.
Exactly.
Right.
It doesn't capture the movement. It doesn't come out of the object you're trying to understand. And so, yeah, it's that's why again, he's very clear that you can't. It's not a method, and that's also a way of saying it doesn't have a definition. Or if you could give a definition for it, it would be abstract and pale.
It would be an abstract, inadequate one. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be an abstract, pale approximation of yeah.
So that is our answer to the question. What is
So that's our answer to the
dialectics?
question. Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like that's
Frankly,
the
I
most
think we did all right.
satisfying answer we could get.
It's good. It's
Yeah,
as
yeah.
good as we're about to do.
Okay, let's do one last question. I like this one
Yeah.
here. What recommendations would you give to a layperson about how to read philosophy better? Not like specific material or thinkers to read, but literally how to better parse and understand philosophical arguments and texts. I love listening to the show, but sometimes feel as though I don't understand all the words being said. While the meaning of it all remains opaque and mysterious to me, is the answer to this problem graduate school, or do I need to just get good at reading? How do you all personally approach a text for analysis? I think that's a really cool question.
That's a good
Let's try to
question,
take
yeah.
a step at it.
And I don't want the answer to be graduate school.
It's not.
Obviously, it's
It's not grad school.
It's not graduate school.
Sometimes graduate school will make you worse.
It'll make you
It
worse.
might make you worse. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I've seen the greatest minds of my generation drunk, mad, start
Absolutely destroyed,
destroyed
by graduate school.
by graduate school. I'll say,
Okay.
here's my best piece of general advice for reading comprehension. You said the end of that question was something like, do I just need to get better at reading? The answer is yes. But the way to get better at reading is by writing. That's the answer for me.
Yeah, that's a-
Like if you're reading a text, write about it. Write about it.
Yeah.
Take notes on it. Get out a Word doc. Just like, what are your thoughts?
Even
What do
in
you
the
think
margins.
it says? Write in the margins. Summarize. Recap for
That's
yourself.
actually something that helped. That's really important. It helped me have a breakthrough in getting my PhD dissertation done, which was I just started to write about everything I was reading.
Just write about what you're reading.
And I stopped worrying about the structure and where it's going to go in the
Don't worry
argument.
about it. Yeah.
And then, there's this recursive relationship where I felt like I was grasping the material in a much richer way. That's good. That's a really good point.
Yeah. for just like methodologically or practically speaking, like a piece of little advice. Like if you're reading a text, like try, and you can't do this with everything because sometimes like paragraphs are too long, but like if it's a normal text, a normal essay, every paragraph's usually trying to communicate one idea. So for yourself in your own document, one sentence summary of the idea that each paragraph is communicating, at the end of which you'll have like a summary of the entire whole. And again, just like trying to remember this like part-whole relationship, right? Like where are you in the text? Remember where you are. Think about structure. Think about, take it for granted that the people who are writing what you're reading had a reason for putting the words in that order, and try to figure out what that reason is. What is the structure that's guiding them? And again, like there's no rereading is crucial. Like the text that I'm able to speak about lucidly, that I'm able to talk about with any kind of facility, it's because I read them 100 times. And and it's annoying to say like, oh, you want to get better at philosophy? Like read something 100 times. Like that's not exactly right. But like these things resist these things do resist like immediate intelligibility, and there's often reasons for that. So just be patient with yourself, and write as much as you can. That's my advice.
I would say I also realized from reading The Science of Logic that like part of it when you're reading something really difficult is grasping on for dear life at the things that you really apprehend.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like do that and like rewrite them, reword them, try to explain more about what he's saying at this moment, the one thing I understood. You know what I mean? And really just gripping onto that, not letting it go, re-articulating it, like driving it into your head. And then as you do that more and more, at least in my experience of working with that book, I just reached a breakthrough at a certain point. And I was like, oh my God, I think I'm understanding almost every sentence I'm reading.
Which is, it's like a runner's high.
Thank God.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah, I think for me, what I always try to say when I try to practice to get better at reading philosophies, constantly even asking myself while reading, what is the problem to which this is supposed to be the answer?
Yes.
in and kind of getting that, trying to elucidate that sort of global view of the text. And
That's
again,
good,
it's the
yeah.
part whole relationship thing, and then you can get to the granular. But what Owen, you were saying about holding on for dear life. Sometimes if a text is opaque, if you can hold on for dear life, here's the thing that this person thought that they were responding to. Here's what they think the outcome's supposed to be. That can kind of become your North Star as you're sifting through opaque claims, opaque words. Just always finding the stakes. Assume everyone thought that there were stakes to what they were
Yeah.
writing. You might be bored by it once you realize what it is.
Like, oh
but
God, these are the
then
stakes. Jesus
Then you
Christ.
know. Oh, these are the stakes?
Oh my God.
Oh, shit.
Throw it in the trash.
Done with
these,
this book.
These stakes suck.
Yeah. Buy
I think
hegemony
these
social
are all
strategy.
really good pieces of advice. I think I do understand the best when I'm taking notes and like writing on the side. Um, but I also think that there are texts where I do that less. And I think there are the texts in which maybe what you guys are just describing as the ones where you kind of have to have an anchor if you don't totally understand what's going on, because they're not written in a way that like makes note taking easy or obvious.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to just like be in the with the movement of the text and then hope it works out. And I think, the one thing I would say about that is that it's kind of meditative to do that, to just kind of like focus and like let the author take you.
Yeah.
But you have to really focus. Like you can't, this is a kind of reading, like if you're taking notes, you can stop and do other things and go back, like modern technology makes like hardcore focus like difficult. But if you don't take notes and you want to just like have like just let like experience a text, you have to focus and not be distracted, otherwise it won't happen.
Totally.
It takes time.
It takes time. I think if this probably all sounds like really arduous. I think the issue is like practice. So it's not true anymore that I read everything just as carefully as everything else. So I was recently reading a book on like metaphysics because I just like really wanted to like learn more about this topic, and I rarely read about metaphysics as such anymore. And so I had to be much like it, like the gears had to start grinding. I had to like think about what I was reading, and I realized, well, when I read things in my area of specialization, unless I'm really excited about it, feel like it's very like especially if I have a negative reaction to something, I'll pay a lot of attention. If I really like something, I'll pay a lot of attention.
Yeah.
Or if I just like feel compelled by it being adventurous or whatever, I might pay a lot of attention. But there's a lot of boring shit that I read, and I don't read everything as carefully. Like once you kind of learn the language, you see the moves that are being made.
Yeah.
There's a pragmatism to just kind of getting like, I just
I
need to
get
know
it.
what they said
Okay,
in
I
this
get it.
article.
Yeah.
And I think everyone probably has that experience, and I think like at some point that's okay, because not everything is going to like impact what you're thinking or interested in, or like the formation of your ideas as much as everything else, mostly because professional philosophers just publish a lot of shit, and not everything is as important as everything else.
Oh my God.
So
I did want to
I don't know, like that.
I agree. No, that's exactly right. And I just wanted to tack on, Lillian, to what you were saying, that like I think about this like reading fast and slow difference like a lot. And like you said, that there are certain texts where like the slow approach it's not conducive to the slow, like, arduous note taking method. And then sometimes you do have to like find that flow state where you just let the author go with you, or carry you along. But you do have to focus, and that is fast reading, and you're fast reading for the shape of the whole. That's like what I think I'm doing
that's right.
there, right?
Yeah.
And then
That's funny.
once you've got that, then you can go back and slow down and do the granular detail. But getting the shape of the whole that first time through on a fast reading is it can be invaluable. Yeah.
Yeah, someone else asked about writing, and I think what you said just applies as well. That like there's this movement, at least for me, like between the kind of synoptic view of
Yes.
what the whole is doing, and then much more like local, like almost overly granular sometimes, to a fault. More kind of like granular focus, but like not needing to do both of those at once. I think is really helpful. Like just let yourself be in whatever the particular thing that you're trying to either read or to write. And then there's also like, and don't fret too much about how it fits with everything else you're trying to say or what else is being said. And then also like let yourself get a little loose at the synoptic view and be like, not obsess over how you're gonna prove each and every part of the big thing you think you're.
I would add one more
Get to
thing
the end,
that
yeah.
agrees with
Get to the
what Will said about like what are the stakes, because
Mm-hmm.
one mistake is to think about learning philosophy as like trying to learn, like in one sense you're trying to learn a discourse, you're trying to learn a language, you're trying to learn a history of ideas, and so that has its own internal dynamics. But every philosopher is answering a question about the world, it's a problem. And so it's not really about, you're learning their concepts for a reason. You're not learning their concepts just to like learn how they function in the argument. You're learning about them to understand something about the world. And so sometimes your intuitions about what it could mean, because it strikes your, it connects with something, like go with that. Like if you think that they're talking about something and that sounds like something recognizable to you, just like
Yeah.
you might have to like reinterpret it later, but you're probably right, because they're not talking about shit that is unrecognizable to you. They're talking about like something you should be able to recognize. So if it like sounds right, go with it, and then you can like revise later.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, I think that's all we have
I've
for
actually
today.
gotta jet.
Or do
Yeah,
you want to? Yeah, you got to go, Owen. Okay.
I gotta jet,
Thanks
yeah.
everyone for your questions, and thanks to all of you who joined us here for this live stream. As you know, What's Left of Philosophy comes out every 2 weeks wherever you get your podcasts. Please follow us on your favorite streaming platforms and subscribe to us here on YouTube for more videos and live streams. See you all next time, and thank you guys for doing this 100th.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
episode.
Yeah, honestly, a huge
And
heartfelt
congratulations
thanks
to us
everybody.
and to you all
Congratulations
for-
to
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
Yeah.
on 100. Love working with y'all and
Yes.
look forward to the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a very heartfelt thank you. I
Yes.
kind of can't believe it.
To everyone. Later.
Okay.